Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Planning Board meeting, October the 1st. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Do we have any declaration of conflicts today? Seeing none, I will point out that we have resident board member Rosemary online. Also, we have planner Stephanie is online to for the first report when that comes up. So, an approval of the agenda. Moved by Jackie, seconded by Bobby. All those in favor? Rosemary?
In favor.
Wonderful. Moving on, an adoption of the minutes from our planning board meeting of September 3rd. Moved by Lee, seconded by Chris. All those in favor? Rosemary?
In favor.
Wonderful. Do we have any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we can move right on to our reports. Our first one is a variance application, 7 Des Brissailles Crescent, PID 374215. And we have planner Stephanie online to give the report. So we'll start with you, Stephanie. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to make sure that you can hear me.
We can hear you great. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So good afternoon, members of the board. I will be presenting the first item on the agenda for a major variance located at 7 Des Brissailles Crescent, property ID 356717, to allow for projections into the rear and side yard setbacks. Next slide, please. The intent of the major variance is to allow for projections into the side and rear setbacks to accommodate the construction of an addition and a deck in the rear yard, as proposed structures do not meet the minimum rear and side yard setback regulations outlined in the R2 zone. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on an interior residential lot within the low-density residential zone and contains a single-family dwelling. The surrounding properties consist of R2 zones containing primarily single-family dwellings as well, which can be seen on the map in the current slide. Next slide, please. The site plan shows the proposed addition in orange at an approximate size of 26 square meters and the proposed wheelchair accessible deck shown in green at an approximate size of 25 square meters. Next slide, please. In accordance with Section 3.9 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, on September 13th, 2024, written notification was sent to property owners located within 100 meters of the subject property. A total of 61 letters were sent to residents advising them of the application to request comments and feedback. Additionally, the applicant reached out to adjacent properties to notify them of the major variance application, receiving support from the neighboring properties. 2 responses opposing the proposal were received. Next slide, please. The comments received expressed concerns regarding drainage and eave overhang, resulting in damage to neighboring properties, as well as fire separation between exterior walls and access to the rear property in the event of an emergency. However, these concerns can be addressed through site design. Through the review of the application, it was determined that the abutting properties are designed in a way that the proposal does not create a significant obstruction of view, and it would allow for a wheelchair accessible entrance and living area for the residents at the subject property. Next slide, please. The Planning and Heritage Department encourages Planning Board to recommend to Council that the following major variance for the subject property addressed at 7 Des Brissailles Crescent, property ID 356717, be approved to allow for the following. 1, an addition to project into the rear and side yards by 1.94 meters, which is 6.36 feet, and 1.18 meters, 3.87 feet, respectively. And a deck to project into a side setback by 1.8 meters, which is 3.87 feet. That concludes my presentation for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Do we have the applicant here today? Yep. So
I believe yes.
I would invite the applicant if they wanted to make any comments on this, or also anybody else that's here that wanted to ask questions for clarification or had any comments, that as chair, I'm able to offer that up to those folks. If anyone out there has any questions or would see clarity, you're more than welcome to come to the mic which is right up front right there, and you can speak. So, yes, go ahead, please. Just for the public record, once you turn the mic on, if you could just state your name, that way Jason's for recording it, so thank you.
Test. My name is Joanne McGinnis. I'm the applicant for the proposed project for myself and my daughter, Mallory Ann LeClaire, who's here today as well. She's in the back row there with her service dog. The properties along that street are all post-war houses, so they're very small. And we did some, my daughter had 2 hip surgeries in Halifax in the last 4 years. And it wasn't hip replacements, it was impingements, and it was quite extensive surgery. So we put railings on the front. And inside the home is very, very small. There's trip hazards. And I'm trying to be proactive. My daughter will be 36 in this month, in October. And what I'm trying to do is propose that a small addition to be on the back of the home in the event that she has to go into a wheelchair or walker because she has many health issues, as well as myself. We're both disabled people. So basically, I'm just trying to be proactive. The housing on Prince Edward Island, as everybody knows, is in a shortage. And we like the community. We've been there. Prior to that, we were on Douglas Street for numerous amount of years. So I'm proposing that this go forth because it is hard to get disabled places for people on Prince Edward Island. That's all I have, unless there's any questions. There's drainage plans that have been done up by an architect plan that I believe the planning department has. The height of the house will be no different, so it won't be impeded on anybody's view. It will be in our yard itself, and the yard is very small anyway. The house, if I'm looking out my back door to the right of me, the house structure is higher on that side. On the left, it's even higher, like it's not as high, but it's higher than the current property that's there. And if the planning department wishes to come down and view the properties, I have no issue with that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Anybody else want to speak before I open it up to committee? Did you have a question?
I just have a question because I'm not really good trying to read these plans, but it looks like there's not going to be a whole lot of space left at all on this property when it's completed, at all, basically.
Right, if you look at the shortcomings, that is one of the shortcomings, that there won't be any green space left in the property.
So they're going to use every single piece of
Pretty well.
property.
Pretty well. Oh, go ahead.
I think if you look at the adjoining property, though, I think there's a green space. If you're looking at the property in question, I think there's a green space to the right. It seems to me that it's a reasonable kind of proposal, and if the drainage issue is going to be addressed, I, for one, will be supporting the request.
I have a copy of the sub-drainage plan, if anybody needs it.
I think that's probably in the report anyways, isn't it, David? Stephanie?
Through the chair, yeah, it is an attachment to the report. The site plan does show the topographic information for the elevation changes in addition to the building footprints as proposed, so.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Lee.
I put a proposal that we accept planning board's recommendation.
So before we do that, is there anyone else that wanted to speak before we put the resolution on the floor? Yep. Okay, go ahead.
I just have one more question. Like, the ground itself will not be disturbed because they're putting in screw piles, so there'll be no digging of the ground. There'll be screw piles put in.
Great.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Yep, sure, go ahead, Jackie, while they're coming up to the mic.
I agree that I think it is a reasonable proposal. My only quick question was, one of the shortcomings is that there's an increased fire risk or risk around access in case of evacuation. Is this substantiated in any way? Like, was this evaluated by planning staff in the case that this is true?
Stephanie, are you able to address that?
Yes, so if you see the site plan, if we can go back to the slide with the site plan, you can see the southern side of the parcel maintains a 1.7 meter setback, which provides room for access in the event of emergency. So if you were to look at other municipalities, they do have 0 lot line parcels, so that would mean that a house would be right up against one side of the parcel on the side property, and then on the other side they have to maintain a 1.5 meters for the event of emergency so they can get access. So if I'm looking from that perspective, other municipalities that they have those rules, this one exceeds that rule because it has 1.7 versus the 1.5 that's needed.
Thank you for that. And, yep, go ahead.
Yes, Madam Chairman. My name is Sally McFadgen, and I'm a retired critical care nurse. I worked open heart cardiac surgery, kidney transplant, coronary care, dialysis, and I worked for 43 years. And I have postgraduates from the University of Saskatchewan and the University of Alberta. And I enjoy quiet and peace. And everybody is entitled to quietness and peace. Now, having said that, this is not the case. I want to show you, I don't know if you have a copy of those, Madam Chairman, to show each member sitting here, of my view from my kitchen window. And this, if you can pass that around, Mona, to the other members. That's a view from my kitchen window that's already in non-compliance with the bylaw.
David, procedurally, are we allowed to pass documentation, or I just want to make sure we're following proper process?
Through the chair, I would say that that's at the chair's discretion. I'm not aware there is anything to say.
Okay, well, then
say
that's
otherwise,
fine. If
so-
it's at my discretion, then information is great. Share the
Okay.
information, for sure.
And the other thing is, I had no input into the obstruction of, this is from my kitchen window. Now, that devalues the price of my property if I went to put my property up for sale, because you can't see out the kitchen window. That's how near the house is. That's the fence. That's the latticework fence on top of a deck, and it's level with her eavesdropping on the roof. And I am dead set against it. Before she put that up, she could stand on the deck and look in, I'm sure, the kitchen window and see what we had for supper. And I totally oppose it. A few years ago, Catherine Hennessy was doing a project and she called me. And you know Catherine, she has been with the Heritage Board for a long time. And at that point in time, I learned a lot from her. And she told me that all these little houses on Despersey Crescent, they were like postage stamp houses, and they were built by Robert L. Cotton, who was really a man ahead of his time. He also built places on Bungalow Place and Park Terrace, where the Clover Farm store is, out near the ball field, and left a bursary for the engineering students at the UPEI. Now, Catherine told me that those little houses, she said, were like cooperative little houses. He was ahead of his time in that he built a co-op type housing project with small houses with the idea on small lots, and not to have any of them at a place in terms of size or land size, frontage, whatever. And Catherine also told me that on our lower part of the street, there's only one house, which is across the street from us, a square little yellow house that was an airport building that was hauled from the airport after the Second World War and made into a home. And a creek used to run underneath that, going right over to the Jones Building, going over from Government Pond. And Catherine thought that they were very worthwhile and had great potential. But if somebody starts ruining the landscape, the whole ambience of this picture is wrong. And the other thing is, I don't know how you can hypothetically change the building because of what might happen. Well, I have a number of things wrong with me, and which I will not state, but I am not putting my money ahead of the horse. The cart is ahead of the horse here, and you don't give an inch to Joanne because she'll take advantage of it. Now, Lona here, would you mind now telling your experience with your fence?
You finish what you need to say.
Do you want me to tell you?
If you just want to finish up, because
Okay.
everyone only has 5 minutes each.
Okay,
so
I'll
you
just
should
finish up then.
Yeah.
And speaking with Lona, my chef Lona Daniels, she had no input into a chain wire fence that was erected behind Joanne and behind Lona's house. And it's not the kind of a fence that Lona would like for privacy. So you see, you don't give an inch or you'll get a mile. And I'm dead set against it. And as I said, I'd worked for 43 years in very stressful areas, and I am due for quiet enjoyment. Everybody's entitled to quiet enjoyment of your property. And I just thank God I don't have to nurse anymore. Oh, by the way, I have a lovely dog, too. She's a King Charles Spaniel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I would just for a point of clarification, fences do not require permit applications if they're under 6 feet. Is that correct? Yep. So if there was a chain link fence put up, as long as it was put in an appropriate area along, it's allowed to be along a property line. Unfortunately, there's no kind of, there's no rules in that particular area on the type of fencing that you can put up. The only areas where there are some rules around fencing would be in the 500 lot. So when it comes to fences, and the question I have for clarification, this picture that was provided with the window and the white, is that fence higher than 6 feet?
That's higher than 6 feet, or that's on top of the deck. Excuse me, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can, but it's okay, I can get the clarification from our planning staff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's on top of the deck and it's level with the drain spout that runs along
Okay.
the top part of the roof.
okay, thank you, yep. And I know, I don't think that's part of the application, but I was just curious of, with our 6-foot limit on fencing, I'm just wondering, David, that's not part of this application today, but was that a permitted application at some other time? Like a variance?
Excuse me, it's not a fence.
Just 1 second, point of order. I'm just asking the planning manager a question.
Through the chair, just to clarify, and we have a copy of the zoning bylaw open here, maximum permitted height for a fence in any zone is actually 2.5 meters or 8.2 feet.
Okay,
And that would be in the rear and side yards, but we don't require building permits for fences, and nor do we have a standalone fencing bylaw in the city to regulate fences. It's only what's in the zoning bylaw as far as regulations are concerned, yeah.
okay. But they can't go higher than 8.2 feet from the ground?
8.2 in this case, but it would be within the rear yard. And you're right, there are additional restrictions if you're down in the 500 lot area.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. Great, thank you. Anyone else wanted to speak, Alona? You wanted
Can I
to?
just clarify, that's not a fence. It's attached to my deck, and it's It's, I have flowers on it for privacy.
Okay,
It's not a fence.
Great.
It's not attached to my fence. It's attached to my deck.
okay, thank you. Anybody else? We're going to move on to our next speaker. Everyone only get permitted to speak once. Oh, there you are. You go ahead. Sorry about that. Didn't see you sitting there.
Okay, my name is Don McFadgen, and I'm the owner's brother of 5 Desversey Crescent. And I guess the first thing that I'd like to point out is Miss McGinnis had said she welcomed you guys to come out and look at the property beforehand. Well, we've already been there and done that and wore that T-shirt because she pays no attention whatsoever to the bylaws, and the city of Charlottetown does not come out and inspect what was requested in the plan. So it gives her a license to do it whatever the hell she wants. And I guess the other
So-
thing is,
And just so we can ask our questions of clarity, we're here to clarify, we have to be respectful of people, and we're just really here to ask for clarification on the application. So you proceed, but just be respectful and mindful of the folks that are here in the room, and just for seeking clarification on the application. So thank you.
thank you. Well, I guess what I'm saying is, we've had issues with snow removal from the existing property before it's going to be covered with buildings. There was snow being dumped on the front lawn. We weren't allowed to access the survey pin that was covered over when Joanne was doing her driveway. It's just been a war for the past 5 years. And as far as her privacy, I guess there's a legal issue here because if my sister is entitled to, and any property owner is entitled to quiet enjoyment, then your view shouldn't be blocked. And I don't care whether that screen was attached to her fence or whether it was attached to the patio. It shouldn't be there because that interferes with her quiet enjoyment. So I guess basically, I don't think there's enough room. And I don't know where she's going to put the snow. And, if this thing goes ahead, you're going to have a lot of upset neighbors.
Great. So I would say from this, your question perhaps to Stephanie, the planner, would be, has there been anything outlined on snow removal? Stephanie, are you able to speak to that for us without putting you on the spot?
I haven't had anything about snow removal, and I haven't looked into it. I don't really have a response for that. I might refer to David to see if he has, because I'm not sure how the snow removal works with the city. Is the concern in the backyard, or is it just from the driveway?
Actually, you know what? Unfortunately, you've had your turn to speak. Yep, it's really important that we follow process. Yep. David, if you can shed any light, I'm assuming you mean that with the congestion or whatever you're referring to it as, that there wouldn't be any room for any snow to be moved from the driveway because there's no backyard left. Is that what you mean? Okay. And David, is there anything to add to that before we move on?
Sorry, I'll speak to that a little bit.
Okay, sure, Stephanie.
There is area in the backyard to put the snow removal. And it looks like there's a little bit in the front as well. But I guess it just depends on how much snow falls down, but that's not something that we can really plan for. We don't know how much snow is going to fall in the run of a year.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anybody else want to speak before I just continue to open it up to the planning board and we move on? Go ahead. You've already spoken. Unfortunately, we're only allowed one time each. Yep.
I used to own the property.
Right.
I know how much space that was there. There's no room.
Good evening. I'm Alona Daniel, and when I was first contacted by Joanne, we had a conversation about the desire to be proactive, to build a small, modest extension, to be proactive, to look after her daughter. And for that, I think that's perfectly reasonable. Family is important. We want to make sure that we're doing those things. I just think when I saw the actual plans and looking at a major variance request, my only question is, or I guess my concerns are related again. Drainage was brought up, and I understand that there is a drainage file created, and I'm just thinking about, we look at the silt in our soil and the shifting nature of our climate change, how reliable and how much time guarantee as a property owner do I have protection from any potential drainage issues that will arise from that? And that for me is the big issue, because there's really not a lot of space for the drainage. And I think, of course, there's earnest efforts being made there to make sure that the plan is accurate. I think if we have storms like we've had in the last few years, that may shift the landscape. And then whose responsibility is that? Who bears the cost of that responsibility? But certainly, as I said, I can understand a modest within the proposed use of the property as an extension, absolutely. But I am concerned by covering the entire lot and covering basically the entire green space with built-up structure. What are the implications in the future for my property? And I think just looking at both sides of that is just sort of where I'm at. And additionally, I believe the back portion that's going to be in my backyard, it just seems very, very close. My experience with Fiona, when the trees fell, it went into all of our yards. So again, just the access, we can say, 1.7 meters, but if you look at how close the properties are together, I think it would be beneficial to actually have people really look at that property and just make sure that it is for the well-being of all of us, because we are so close together. And I think that's sort of, certainly there's a room, but where is it safe for everybody as well? The long term with environmental impacts.
Thank you. I think if I hear you correctly, Stephanie, are you able to speak to the fact that if a major variance for the rear yard setback is granted, and then the neighboring property turns around and applies for the same thing, would that then become the properties would almost be touching each other? We've heard of situations like that before, like when we allow for that much. I'm just wondering if there was any, in terms of measurements, I know I've seen the properties, they are close, and I'm just curious if you have any information on that, Stephanie?
Are you speaking to the rear property?
Yeah.
Yeah, like there would be, if we did a very similar setback, if you look at the site plan that was in the slide again, the closest area of the deck itself, not even the addition is set back by 5.56 meters. So that is quite a good distance. And then the deck, which isn't a covered structure, it's just a deck. And depending on the height of it, we wouldn't get a permit for it, you know what I mean? So depending on the height. But anyways, that is 2.69 meters from the rear property line. If they both had that similar setback, then they would be approximately 6 meters away from each other. Okay. So they wouldn't be touching per se, you know what I mean? There would still be a setback.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anything else, Alona?
Nope.
Okay, great. So back to our, thank you very much, folks. Yes, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Two questions I have just after hearing everything. Is drainage usually an issue, David, if they, like when they talked about putting it on the stilts, as far as you're not moving the land and stuff for water and stuff, would that still be an issue, even just digging down when you put it on tubes or on whatever they're, yeah, that, first of all. And my second question is, what is an as-of-right built here? So if she doesn't have a major variance, is this something that within her as-of-right she's going to be able to do at a little bit smaller scale? So those would be my two questions that I'd like answered.
And I'm going to either defer that to either Stephanie or to David, whichever of the two want to answer it, because I'd be curious too of what could be built in an as-of-right. Could the same thing be built, but just be slightly smaller?
Not through a major variance, or not without a major variance, because as the property sits, it's a legal non-conforming property. So the house already doesn't meet the side setback. And so really with the addition, they're only extending it back further. They're not projecting further into the side yard than the existing structure. So regardless of, even if they were to put on 10 square meters, they're still going to need a major variance because of the side setback, because we grandfathered this house in once the zoning and development bylaw came into effect. And then in regards to the drainage plan shows that all water should drain to Des Brisset Crescent. And then when I condition the permit, I would also state that it has to drain onto that road and it can't be draining into the neighboring properties.
Thank you for that. So I would assume that all of the houses along there, because they spoke to them as being tiny and tiny lots, they're probably all legal non-conforming, are they?
Yes, you can see on the neighboring property to the north that they're actually only set back by 0.65. And it almost looks like their deck is almost right up against the property line as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions for anyone? And if this was not permitted, Stephanie, is there still the ability to make a ramp for a wheelchair? If the only thing they could do, can they still get an accessibility piece to get a wheelchair into their property?
With the plan that they have, yes, they would be able to do the deck and the ramp.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Yep. Any questions from the board? Rosemary? I'm sorry, but you've already spoken and you can't. It's just the process. Yep, I'd love for you to be able to speak 100 times, but I have to follow process. Yeah. Rosemary, any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. And so Lee has put a resolution on the floor to accept staff's recommendation. Do I have somebody that would second that recommendation? Okay, seconded by Paul Conley. So the question's now on the floor. Any questions on the resolution? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of accepting staff's recommendation to move this on to council to accept the project plan? All those in favor? Okay, so we have Jackie, Bobby, Lee, and Paul. Those opposed? We have Councillor McCabe, Chris Fournier, Councillor Beck, and Rosemary?
In favor.
In favor. Oh, she was in favor, so that was 1, 2, 4, 5, 3. So that will move on to council with the board accepting staff's recommendation. So this moves on to the next council meeting for council's final decision. So thank you very much, folks. Okay, next item on the agenda would be rezoning and site-specific 161, 167 Mount Edward Road. And this is a request to recommend to council to proceed to a public consultation. And I'll turn that over to our Manager of Development Planning, David Gundrum.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Following application is a request to rezone portions of the identified subject properties addressed as 161 to 167 Mount Edward Road, PID numbers 390260, 390273, and 566976 as shown on the air photo on the image on the screen. And this is to rezone portions of the subject properties from the low-density residential single R2S zone to the comprehensive development area CDA zone to allow for the development of 150 apartment units on the site. The following slide illustrates a zoning map of the subject properties highlighted in red and the immediate area. Properties are located along the west side of Mount Edward Road, shown here, directly south of the T intersection with Pine Drive, shown here. The street fronting portion of the properties are within the R2S zone, as shown here in stippling, and the hatched portion to the rear is currently in the CDA zone. The subject properties are adjacent to and in the vicinity of primarily existing single detached residential development, as well as institutional developments which are to the south, shown in blue on the map here. Two of the subject properties contain existing single detached dwellings, and the balance of the lands are otherwise vacant and undeveloped at the present time. The next slide illustrates a concept site plan that the proponents have put forward, showing proposed 2 5-story apartment buildings. First building shown here would have 50 units, and the second building shown here to the rear would contain, proposed to contain 100 units. There'd be 2 new accesses punched onto Mount Edward Road to the north and the south of the consolidated site, and there is proposed to be a combination of both surface and underground parking spots as part of the development. As per section 3.10.3 of the zoning and development bylaw, before the rezoning of any parcel of land, council shall conduct a public meeting to receive the views and opinions of the public and the applicant. Council may, for reasons that are in the best interest of the city, reject a proposed amendment to the bylaw without public notice and without referral to a public meeting. But if an application goes to a public meeting, the council shall determine the disposition of the application. If the proposed rezoning and redesignations are approved, to proceed to the public consultation phase, then the Planning and Heritage Department will notify the public of the future public meeting date in accordance with section 3.10.4 of the zoning and development bylaw. The following next slide rather has excerpts taken out of our planning report. The parcel identified as PID 566976, as well as the street fronting portions of the remaining 2 parcels, are noted as being within the R2S zone of the zoning and development bylaw, while the balance of PID numbers 390260 and 390237 are within the comprehensive development area CDA zone. The existing split zoning of the site is inhibiting the potential for higher density development across the combined properties. Given the amount of vacant land on the combined site, or what would be the combined site, the properties can be said to be underdeveloped at the present time, especially in the context that they have unrestricted direct access to full municipal services, being sewer, water, and public roads. The proposed rezoning of that portion of the subject properties that is currently within the R2S zone would effectively harmonize the combined site to be within the CDA zone, and therefore allow for the full utilization of the CDA zoning that already applies to the majority of the site, but is stymied in its potential by the presence of the R2 zoning along the main road frontage. The proposed harmonization of zoning would result in a situation that is more in keeping with the intent and purpose of the overall CDA zone and the zoning and development bylaw more widely to ensure consistent development rights property to property. So to conclude, planning staff are recommending on the basis of the submission that we encourage planning board to recommend to council to proceed to public consultation for the request to amend Appendix A, the future land use map of the City of Charlottetown official plan, from low-density residential to comprehensive planning area, and also to amend Appendix G, zoning map of the City of Charlottetown zoning and development bylaw, from low-density residential single R2S zone to the comprehensive development area CDA zone for the properties located at 161, 167 Mount Edward Road, PID numbers 390260, 390-237 and 566-976. And that is a summary of the application and our recommendation to the board, and I'll turn it back over to the chair for any discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So staff is recommending that we move this along to council to proceed to public consultation. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Beck. Oh, okay. Moved by Councillor Beck and seconded by Councillor McCabe that we accept staff's recommendation to move this on to council to proceed to public consultation. Any questions on the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor? Rosemary?
In favor.
Okay, and nobody is opposed, so that's great. Thank you. So that will move on to council. Thank you very much. Okay. Next item on the agenda is 7 McKinnon Road, PID 374215. Request to change the zoning of the subject property from low density to medium density, and David Gundrum, our Manager of Development Planning, is here to present the application. Over to you, David.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. The following application is a request to rezone the identified subject, that should read subject property, from low-density residential R2 zone to the medium-density R3 zone, residential R3 zone, to allow for the development of a 7-unit apartment building on the site. The subject property is located along the north side of McKinnon Road, just west of the intersection with University Avenue, and is located approximately 60 meters, 197 feet from the University of Prince Edward Island campus. University campus is shown here in blue. Subject property is highlighted here in red, fronting onto McKinnon Road. Again, the subject property is within the low-density residential R2 zone, adjacent to and in the vicinity of existing single-detached, semi-detached townhouse and apartment unit development. And I'll note for board's information that the higher density development is located as shown on the map here to the south, which is all number of parcels in the R3 zone consisting of townhouse and apartment units. Subject property is currently vacant, containing no buildings or structures. Next slide illustrates a site plan which has been provided by the proponents, showing the proposed 7-unit apartment building here with road access to the south coming off McKinnon Road with surface on-site parking shown here. Main entrance of the building would be facing to the east, shown here. Next slide illustrates concept floor plans for the development. All units would be 3-bed units with a gym and common space on the basement level as shown. The next number of slides show a number of 3D rendered perspectives of the building. So the first image is showing the building facing to the northwest, facing to the southwest, facing southeast, facing directly east, a view facing south, and the view of the building facing north. In terms of our legislative requirements, on August 13th, 2024, City Council approved a request to proceed to public consultation. As per section 3.10.4 of the Zoning Development Bylaw, a mailed notification letter was sent to all owners within 100 meters, 325 feet of the subject property on September 6, 2024, which was the minimum 7-day calendar circulation requirement prior to the public hearing date, which was held on September 18th, 2024. A total of 54 letters were sent to residents to advise them of the public meeting on September 18th to solicit their comments and feedback. And in response to the circulation, the city did not receive any written responses from members of the public on this application. The following slide shows a summary of our analysis of the application, just highlighting the positives. The rezoning will enable compact form and infill development of medium density housing to meet future needs. The property is in proximity to complementary and supporting businesses, services, and amenities. A density of 58 units per hectare has been measured for the subject property based on the number of units proposed, and is very close and comparable to the existing residential density of 65 units per hectare for the neighboring higher density residential block, which is to the south. A neutral comment is that the development would require a building development permit. Some shortcomings of the proposal are a lack of 2 access points for McKinnon Road. McKinnon Road dead ends, and this might be an issue for road access. and with respect to traffic volumes on University Avenue. And lastly, the proposed development could impact existing privacy that nearby residents have grown accustomed to over time, owing to the presence of an empty lot at this location. Section 3.1 of the official plan states that policy shall be to allow for moderately higher densities in neighborhoods, provided it is development at a density that will not adversely affect existing lower density housing. The subject property does not belong to what can be described as a consistent neighborhood block. The existing neighborhood block, however, to the south contains a mix of both townhouses and apartment units, having an overall density of 65 units per hectare, while the proposed density for the site development would be 58 units per hectare, which is within approximately 10% of the background density for the surrounding area. And on that note, our recommendation to the Planning Board, Planning and Heritage Department encourages Planning Board to recommend that City Council approve the following rezoning request, and that is to amend Appendix G, zoning map of the zoning and development bylaw from low-density residential R2 zone to medium-density residential R3 zone for the property located at 7 McKinnon Road, being PID number 374215. So that is a summary of the application, our recommendation, and I'll turn it back over to the chair for any further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions? Yep, Counselor McCabe.
Sorry. And thank you for your presentation, David. And as much as I love to see new development along where we say that we want to see new development on busy roads and stuff, I do have concerns when we have two departments that are concerned with the one access point for this street coming off University. So whether it be for Public Works indicating just sheer traffic alone, but also looking at the safety when it looks at fire and other services accessing. Is there any other solution to this to improve that second access point? I mean, it is a nice vacant land. I see that, but I'm just wondering, is there any way around that issue with the two access points?
I'm going to defer that to David. Yep.
Through the chair, Councillor McCabe, I have the air photo up of what the road network currently looks like. There really is no obvious solution to that dilemma here, unfortunately. Given McKinnon Road dead ends where it does, and there wouldn't be, I'm just going to highlight here, there's not really a sufficient width. You can see how the parcel, the publicly owned portion narrows in this area. There isn't a sufficient width there to extend McKinnon Road to the west. Brown's Court serves more as an internal laneway almost for the townhouse development to the south. And so I guess what both Public Works and Fire were getting at is it wasn't so much a second access for the parcel itself, it was actually for the public road portion, that the only way in and out is off University Avenue. And if you had a fire, let's say at this site or the site here, it would restrict and potentially block access for residents that live towards the end of McKinnon Road from getting out in the event of an emergency. There is no obvious solution here. Again, Public Works and Fire didn't provide a hard opposition to this. They just expressed concern for the additional density given that McKinnon Road is a dead-end road, but they weren't, I'll say that they weren't completely opposed to this, but they did express concern for planning board's information, so.
And as someone, I've had apartments where we've had one access point where there has been emergency situations, so I think I'm probably hypersensitive to that when we're putting multi-units, and so I'm really struggling with supporting planning board or planning staff's recommendation just on those safety issues.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? So the staff is recommending that to Planning Board to recommend to City Council that we approve the zoning request. Do I have anyone that wants to put the resolution on the floor? Moved by Lee, seconded by Councillor Beck. So the resolution is on the floor. Any questions on the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of supporting staff's recommendation to move on to council? Rosemary?
In favor.
Okay, and those opposed? And we have one opposed, Councillor McCabe. So that will move on to council with the same recommendation as from the planning staff. Thank you for that. So moving on to our next item on the agenda, and that is 171, 181 Kensington Road.
Chair,
Yes.
just Bob and I are just having a side conversation here. David, can you go back to that map just for a sec? It's really not changing anything, just a point of clarification. It's the one that shows Brown's Court, page 50. I don't have my readers. What is that, Bob? 53? 53. Page 53. That page there, yeah. So does that, is Brown's Court, is that open access to McKinnon Road, or is that a cul-de-sac there? Where you come off University, McKinnon's Road, and then you turn left onto Brown's Court. Is that an access, is that a full access road there? Or does Brown's Court come to a dead end? Or does it open onto McKinnon Road? Do you know where I'm referring to there, David? Just to the left of 862672?
Right here?
Just south of the subject property.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Does Brown's Court, is Brown's Court a dead end there, or is it connected to McKinnon Road? I can't remember.
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Beck, that does connect with McKinnon Road as far as we're aware. This at the north end, and it does proceed through that development to the south. I believe there's another road connection on the other end. Yeah, but it's not. My understanding is that this is not a publicly owned thoroughfare. It's a private laneway. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, the city doesn't have care and control over that. So,
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, 171, 181. Kensington Road, request to change the zoning of the subject properties from single detached residential to medium density residential townhouse. And I'll turn that over to David Gundrum again, our Manager of Development Planning.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So the following application is a request to rezone the identified subject properties, 171 to 181 Kensington Road, being PID numbers 385930, 385948, and 555177. And it's to rezone the subject properties from the single detached residential R1L zone to the medium density residential townhouse R-3T zone to allow for the development of 12 townhouse units on the combined site. And if the zoning is successful, there would be an associated application for subdivision for lot consolidation that would have to occur. The properties are located on the west side of Kensington Road, as highlighted in red, at the northwest corner of the intersection with Hemlock Drive, and they are approximately 80 meters or 260 feet northwest of the boundaries of the Belvedere Golf Course to the southeast. They are located within the single detached residential R1L zone adjacent to and in the vicinity of primarily existing single detached residential development. Subject properties are each currently developed with single detached dwellings on 3 individual lots. The next slide illustrates a site plan that the proponents have provided for the proposed development. Kensington Road is here to the east of the site, Hemlock Drive to the south, and there are 2 new road accesses proposed, one off Hemlock Drive, one off Kensington Road, and the units are proposed to be organized into 3 blocks, 4 units, 6 units, and, 3 units, 4 units, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units here for a total of 12. Next couple of slides illustrate the proposed design and scale and massing of the townhomes. This is a 3D rendered perspective facing west, which would be internal to the site, and the internal showing a portion of what would be the internal laneway. The next slide is the design renderings facing east towards Kensington Road. And as noted, one of the new road accesses is shown in the bottom right-hand corner of the image. And in terms of our legislative requirements, on August 13th, 2024, City Council approved a request to proceed to public consultation. As per Section 3.10.4 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, a notification letter was sent to all owners within 100 meters of the subject property on September 6, 2024, which met the minimum 7-day calendar requirement prior to the public hearing date of September 18th, 2024. A total of 44 letters were sent to residents advising of the public meeting on September 18th to solicit their written comments and feedback. And to date, 7 written responses were received, which all expressed opposition to the proposal, and a copy of those letters has been included as attachment to our report in the planning board package. Just a summary of the community response that we received. Responses from neighborhood residents generally expressed opposition to the proposed development on the basis that it does not fit within the context of a low-density, single-detached neighborhood in terms of proposed density and built scale. Concerns were also expressed with regard to site drainage, increased traffic, road access, property upkeep and maintenance, preservation of mature trees, harmony of proposed design with existing nearby development, parking limits for the site, on-site garbage storage and snow removal, and fencing and screening of the property with respect to nearby low-density properties, and also concern for emergency vehicle access for the site. A summary of our evaluation and analysis of the application is as follows. Some positives. The rezoning would better enable the facilitation of compact urban form and infill development of medium-density housing to meet future needs. The property is in proximity to many complementary and supporting businesses, services, and amenities, as well as parks, daycares, places of worship, and public transit. Neutral comment is that the development would require a building development permit, as well as an application for lot consolidation to enable it to occur. And some identified shortcomings are that the proposed development could impact the prevailing single-detached dwelling fabric of the surrounding area and would displace 3 existing residences in the area. Proposed density for the development is approximately 30 units per hectare, which is 4 times that of the existing background density of the neighborhood block. The closest R3 zoned property at a similar density is approximately 200 meters or 656 feet away from the subject property. Just further to our analysis, Official Plan Section 3.1 states that policy shall be to allow for moderately higher densities in neighborhoods, provided that it is development at a density that will not adversely affect existing low-density housing. It's noted that the planning literature, this is not the official plan, but general planning literature, typically states that a range of density for single detached neighborhoods is on the order of between 10 to 20 units per hectare. The existing neighborhood block has an overall density of 7.6 units per hectare, as measured from our mapping data, while the proposed density for the site development would be 30 units per hectare, being approximately 4 times that of the existing background neighborhood density. Section 3.2 of the official plan states that an objective is to preserve the built form and density of Charlottetown's existing neighborhoods and to ensure that new development is harmonious with its surroundings. And this is again reading out of our report. As a conclusion, based on review of the related official plan policies that can be applied, it is the opinion of planning staff that while the proposed development is in alignment with and would fulfill the intent and purpose of some of the noted official plan policies, the intensity and proposed density of the development cannot be said to be wholly consistent with the statements made under sections 3.1 and 3.2 of the official plan as it regards density and adverse effects on existing low-density housing, as well as preservation of existing neighborhood built form and density. As has been noted, the response to the public circulation on the part of neighborhood residents has been overall negative, citing a number of comments concerning land use impacts related to density of the proposed development with respect to existing character and density of the neighborhood. While not all comments received from the neighborhood have immediate grounds in land use impacts, the consistency of comments citing opposition to the proposal on the basis of proposed density in the context of existing built forms and neighborhood character are wholly consistent and supported in their opposition by the policy statements found under section 3.1 and 3.2 of the official plan. And so to conclude, our recommendation is as follows. Planning and Heritage Department encourages Planning Board to recommend that City Council deny the following rezoning request, which is to amend Appendix G zoning map of the zoning and development bylaw from single detached residential R1L zone to medium density residential townhouse R3T zone for the property located at 171, 181 Kensington Road, being PID numbers 385-930, 385-948, and 555-177. So that is a summary of our evaluation and our recommendation to the planning board, and I'll turn it back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions? No, no questions. It's at my discretion, so I say yes. You've been here all the way through this process, so I guess you're seeing it through to the end.
Well, I'm very pleased with the planning staff's recommendation. I think that Robert Vokey is my name. The planning staff's recommendation. I think there's a number of other issues that were raised. I won't repeat those. Those are in the documentation, etc. However, I've made this comment privately with the chair, but I'd like to make it to the full board, that in the official plan in two different places, it refers to design guidelines for townhouses. They only apply to affordable housing townhouses or townhouses in East Royalty for some reason. They don't apply anywhere else in the city. They're excellent guidelines. And I don't know if it's the planning board's, within the planning board's purview or how this process might work, but I'm anticipating the developer to come back with round two. As you can see in the rendering, I characterize the design as Darth Vader Motel. The townhouse design guidelines would provide with a much more conducive design for the neighborhood. And I don't know if the planning board, or maybe you can give me advice, or I'll just read this into the minutes, that some serious consideration be given to amend the official plan so that the townhouse guidelines be made universal for the city, because it logically doesn't make sense that they would apply just to affordable housing or just to one part of the city. That's my only comment.
Thank you for that. And so that wouldn't be planning board, that would be a policy decision, so that would fall under the Planning and Heritage Committee and the staff. So it's certainly something that we can take under consideration as we are making changes to our official plan and zoning and development bylaw. So I appreciate that, and it's duly noted now in the minutes so that we can have a look at townhouse guidelines throughout the entire city.
Okay.
So thank you for that.
Thank you. And again, I obviously speak in favor of the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, so we have, if there's no questions, we have a recommendation from the Planning Department to recommend to City Council to deny the following zoning request, moved by Councillor Back. Anyone want, seconded by Bobby Kenny. So the resolution is on the floor. Any questions on the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of recommending to council to deny this application? Rosemary?
In favor.
Okay, so that's unanimous. That will move on to council with a recommendation from the planning board and planning staff to deny this application. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on. Jason, are you able to get our IT guys? My battery is dying and the charger's not working. Thank you, sorry about that. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, 55 Pope Avenue. And again, that's over to you, David.
Okay.
Over to you, David.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just wait a moment here. Okay. Madam Chair, members of the board, the following application is a request to rezone the identified subject properties as PID numbers 1173640 and 1173657, which are adjacent to 55 Pope Avenue as shown on the image here. Highlighted in red are the two subject properties, and adjacent to them is 55 Pope Avenue, PID 452839. This is a request to identify to rezone the identified properties from single detached residential R1L to the institutional zone to allow for expansion of an outdoor amenity and parking area associated with an established commercial daycare center, which is the Tiny Tot Early Childhood Center located at 55 Pope Avenue, PID 452839. The next image is a zoning map of the subject properties and surrounding area. The properties are located along the east side of Brackley Point Road and are on separate parcels but physically contiguous with the site at 55 Pope Avenue containing the existing commercial daycare center. They are located again within the R1L zone adjacent to and in the vicinity of primarily existing single detached residential development. Subject properties are currently vacant and undeveloped, containing no buildings or structures. The next two slides are images to show perspective of the subject properties. The existing commercial daycare is shown here, this structure with an existing fenced area, playground area for the children, and parking area shown here. This is a view looking west from the Pope Avenue, which is in the foreground of the image. The next image is a view looking east from Brackley Point Road, which shows a view, much clearer view of the two parcels, which are side by side each other here, being just an open field currently. Next is a site plan image of the proposed expansion for the daycare use, which shows the expanded parking area shown here that would service the commercial daycare and a expanded amenity area for the children shown here. On August 13th, 2024, City Council approved a request to proceed to public consultation for the application. As per Section 3.10.4 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, a mailed notification letter was sent to all owners within 100 meters, 328 feet of the subject property on September 6, 2024, to meet the required 7 calendar day circulation period prior to the public meeting that was held September 18th, 2024. A total of 23 letters were sent to residents advising them of the public meeting on September 18th to solicit their comments and feedback, and no written responses were received from members of the public in response to circulation. Next slide contains a summary of our analysis of the application. Some positives are that the rezoning would help enhance a community need, being daycare services which are currently in high demand throughout the city. The property is within an established neighborhood on a local street that could benefit from the expansion and enhancement of an existing daycare center. Neutral comment is that the development would require a building development permit to enable the change of use for the site following any zoning approval, and a noted shortcoming is that the proposed rezoning might cause slight increases to traffic flows during certain times of day due to the new road access points that would be onto Brackley Point Road. Further to our analysis, Official Plan Section 3.2 contains policy to ensure that the footprint, height, massing, and setbacks of new institutional development in existing neighborhoods is physically related to their surroundings. Based on the submission, the proposed development would represent a harmonious extension of the existing site development with respect to surrounding low-density residential uses. And with respect to the proposal, there would be no height, massing, or setback considerations to evaluate, as there are no associated buildings or structures that are being proposed. Section 3.2 of the official plan also states that it shall be policy to allow for small-scale institutional development which serves the local needs of the neighborhood subject to city development regulations. And on this basis and the limited physical scope and impact of the proposed development, it can be said to fulfill the intent and purpose of the official plan in this regard. So to conclude, our recommendation is as follows, that the Planning and Heritage Department encourages Planning Board to recommend that City Council approve the following rezoning request, and that is to rezone the subject properties, PID numbers 1173640 and 1173657 from single detached residential R1L zone to the institutional zone to facilitate expansion of an outdoor children's play area and parking area that would be associated with an existing commercial daycare center located on an abutting property identified as 55 Pope Avenue, PID 452839. So that is a summary of the request and our recommendation, and I'll turn it back to the chair for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I know Councillor Becker touched a little bit on this at the last meeting we had. Are you able to outline for us, just so we have it on public record, that if we do change the zoning from the R1 to institutional, what other permitted uses would be under institutional, unless the list is way too long? It's huge. Okay.
Through the chair, yeah, there is a lengthy list. I'd say it's about 15 to 20 different permitted uses within the institutional zone
Right.
that are allowed, yeah.
So example might be like a hospital?
Conceivably, community institutional use, there's a lengthy list there. I don't have it committed to memory. I can't recall from memory, and I don't want to
Right.
misspeak right now.
Okay.
But it's a fairly lengthy list of permitted
Community
uses.
centers,
Yes, yes. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Maybe we could include that when it goes to council. Just, I wouldn't mind knowing, even just for a reference point, that we can at least refer to that when we're deliberating at council.
Yep, we can certainly include that in
Great.
updated package. For
Perfect,
council.
thank you.
Make a note of it. Yep.
Any other questions? Councillor McCabe.
And it probably, I was watching online the night of the public meeting, and I know what you were referencing when we talked, Councillor Beckett talked about looking to see if they would be willing to do a site-specific for this lot. And I'm just wondering, did that happen? Was there conversation to see if they'd be willing? I agree that I'm all in favor of supporting an expansion for children to play, but when we do look at the exhausting list of industrial opportunities, when we change zoning properties we change them, where instead we're trying to support an existing operation function.
And the manager did speak to the applicant, but it's at the applicant's discretion whether they wanted to move on to a different application. And it wouldn't have disrupted the process, but they chose to continue with this process.
And on a follow-up to that, if we rejected changing to institutional, is that considered a new application for this property, or would they have to wait for a year to reapply?
That's a great question, and that's a Jedi question for David.
Through the chair to address Councillor McCabe's question, we did consult with the applicant. I'll try to go in order as best I can. We did consult with the applicant prior to the meeting, and we were of consensus that they were going to continue forward with the application as presented to be a rezoning. They felt that it was just more appropriate to do that, and part of that too is that this is an expanding operation. There's a reason why they've applied for what they've applied for here, and in future, if they wanted to expand into other portions of the site, the way, if we were to approach this through a site-specific, it would limit them only to the specific things they've applied for and nothing else. So if ever the daycare wanted to do something otherwise that would otherwise fit in the institutional zone, they would have to circle back with a new application again. And to answer your question, the other question about if this application was turned down, we would, even though the intent is the same, it would be a different amendment they are applying for. So that would be, I would say, I can't give a straight answer here. I think we would consult with our legal team on as to whether or not there would be that 1 year period or not. This would be a bit of a gray area that we're getting into, and I think out of an abundance of caution, I would seek a legal opinion to confirm whether or not they'd have to wait a year or otherwise. But it would be a different type of amendment. It would be a new application, so there is that. But we would seek a legal opinion, I think, to confirm. So.
Thank you for that. Councillor Beck?
Yeah, I did raise that at the, I think at the public meeting, was it? Yeah. I guess I would have, I guess my preference would have been that we go that route, but not a hill that I would be prepared to die on either. I do want to commend David and the team for circling back and for, continuing the conversation and the applicant. I trust that there was some good second thought and put into the decision, and the offer was made, and it is the application that they're going for. And I guess I wouldn't want to, although my preference might be to keep it a little bit more of a, I don't know, maybe a little bit more flexible or a little bit different designation. I think there's, Bobby and I were just talking off hand here. There's been, it is a valuable service that is going to the community, and there is a need. It's a benefit, it's community benefit, even with the institutional zoning. So in spite of my personal preferences, I would not stand in the way of seeing this go through, and I will be supporting it. So I just want to thank the applicant and David for following through and reconsidering on it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, the staff have recommended, the planning board recommend to council to accept the following application for rezoning. So do I have somebody that would want to move by Bobby Kenny, seconded by Jackie? So the resolution is on the floor to accept staff's recommendation to allow for the rezoning from residential to institutional. Any questions on the resolution? Seeing none? All those in favor? Rosemary?
In favor?
Did you say in favor? Who else did I see was
Yeah.
in favor?
Yeah, in favor.
Okay, and who else was in favor? Can I see hands again? Oh, everyone, okay. All right, nobody opposed, so there we go. Okay, so that will move on to council with a recommendation from planning board and staff to accept staff's recommendation to rezone. Okay, final item on the agenda is a reconsideration for 20 Ralden Avenue. And I believe that's you, Laurel. I'll move that over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is an application for a request for reconsideration under Section 3.15 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw regarding an application for requesting a site-specific exemption to the provisions of the low-density residential R2 zone to allow an existing double-bay garage structure on the subject property at 20 Ralden Avenue to be used as an automotive repair shop. The application was rejected by council on August 13th, 2024. And on August 30th, 2024, a letter requesting a reconsideration, which is attached to your report as Attachment A, was received from the applicant and the owner of the property. The applicants contend that they did not receive approval because it was a close vote, and council may have ruled differently had one member of council remained in council chambers to vote. They also contend that they did not have an opportunity to outline the business operations to council. So some background, the property in question, it's located on the corner of Ralden Avenue. It's currently occupied by a double bay garage that's a single-story structure, right here outlined in blue. A plumbing and heating business operated out of the building for some time, and surrounding properties in the area are predominantly single detached dwellings within the same R2 zone, so single detached here. Located directly across the street here from the subject property is another legal non-conforming industrial use which contains a 4-bay garage structure which formerly housed Creed's Petroleum. On June 5th, 2024, an application was submitted to Planning Board for a site-specific exemption to allow an existing double-bay garage to be used as an automotive repair shop. And on June 19th, 2024, the Planning Board met to discuss the site-specific exemption. Planning staff recommended to the Planning Board that the request for a site-specific exemption be approved to proceed to public consultation. And at the regular meeting of Council on July 8th, 2024, Council approved the rezoning application to proceed to public consultation. As per the bylaw, notice of the public meeting was posted in The Guardian on 2 separate occasions. That was June 29th and July 26th, or July 6th, 2024, and a copy of the notice was also posted on the subject property. On June 26th, 34 notification letters were sent to property owners advising them of the request and date and time of the public meeting. And on July 10th, the public meeting with council took place. Planning staff presented the application to council and the public, and the applicants did not attend this meeting. At the public meeting, council asked for points of clarification on the application. 3 members of the public were in attendance to speak to the application. Additionally, 1 letter was received in opposition, and a petition in support with 11 signatures was also received. At the July 18th Planning Board meeting, planning staff recommended for approval of the site-specific exemption. However, Planning Board did not recommend for approval of the application due to concerns for expanding and intensifying illegal non-conforming use. At the regular meeting of council on August 13th, 2024, council decided to deny the application based on concerns regarding the potential of additional legal non-conforming uses and how it could negatively impact the surrounding area. So the process for reconsideration, in order for an application to be reconsidered, there are 2 stages to a reconsideration request, and the application, it must pass a threshold test. So to pass the threshold test, the applicant must provide information to show that the request falls within the stated grounds contained in section 3.15 of the bylaw. And the 3 main factors in determining whether an application passes the threshold test are new material, facts, or evidence not available at the time of the initial order or decision have come to light. So right here. A material change of circumstances has occurred since the initial order or decision, or there is clear doubt as to the correctness of the order or decision in the first instance. If after receiving a recommendation from the board, council determines that the request passes the threshold test, reconsideration will be given on the merits of the application, and that is considered stage 2 of the process. So the application is currently at the threshold test, stage 1. Staff has reviewed the application and the initial application and the grounds that were put forth by the applicant for reconsideration. The applicant is basing the request for reconsideration on A, new material, facts, or evidence not available at the time of the initial order or decision have come to light, and C, there is clear doubt as to the correctness of the order or decision in the first instance. So staff findings do not support this claim. There's no new information that has come forward since the initial decision to deny the site-specific amendment request. Staff have examined the contents of the file. There is no evidence to suggest that council did not have sufficient information to formulate a decision based on both the technical requirements and the public consultation process relating to the application. Applicants contend in their submission outlining their reasons for requesting a reconsideration that they did not have an opportunity to outline the operations of the business with council. And staff would note that the applicants did not attend the public meeting, and therefore they were not present to address any questions regarding their application to the public or to council. And it is the responsibility of the applicant to represent their application at a public meeting. Council, when assessing an application for a site-specific exemption, must weigh both planning staff's professional recommendation based on land use planning principles and input from the public concerning their neighborhood. This area of Ralden has had a long history of concerns by residents regarding conflicting land uses and legal non-conforming use. In terms of process, it's evident that the contents of the file that, the proper process as prescribed by the zoning and development bylaw were followed. Although staff's recommendation was based on the technical attributes of the application, public input, and surrounding land use, council had to weigh the opinion of the residents regarding the neighborhood. In doing this, council based their decision to reject the application on the policies, goals, and objectives of the official plan. And I have included key sections from the official plan in the report, and 2 of those main ones are sustaining Charlottetown's neighborhood, defining our direction, and appropriate industrial development. So these sections of the official plan, they speak to preserving the integrity and character of existing neighborhoods and to relocate industrial development in areas that have, that lessen land use impacts. Although this property has a history of legal nonconforming use, it's reasonable to assume that an automotive repair shop has the potential to be more intensive of a use with work being done on-site as opposed to a plumbing repair shop where most work is done off-site. Based on various sections of the official plan, it is evident the council did consider the residents' concern with protecting the stability, harmony, and integrity of their neighborhood. It also appears that they considered the long-standing history of the industrial use at this location. So, in conclusion, it's staff's opinion that council considered the zoning and development bylaw, as well as the official plan when determining the application. In addition, there is no new information that has come forward since the initial decision to deny the request for a site-specific exemption, and further, a material change of circumstances has not occurred since the original decision. Staff recommends the rejection of the request for reconsideration as the grounds proposed for the reconsideration by the applicants do not meet the requirements of Section 3.15 of the zoning and development bylaw and the threshold test. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your report, Laurel. Councillor McCabe.
Not as much a question. I think it's more, thank you for taking the time to have to go and do this. I think when we open our zoning and development bylaw, we have to get rid of this 3.15 section. I know we've had lots of discussion because, you know, when people aren't happy with decisions council makes, they do have another course to be reconsidered. That's the IRAC decision that they can follow that process. I'm not sure. I think they said that this came in a long time ago and it just doesn't suit. I think we have to, know our staff is professional when they recommend and then we make a decision based on the information. But there is nothing new that has come of this application. Therefore, I'm going to put right on a motion to support staff's recommendation to not reconsider this application.
Okay, so we have a resolution on the floor moved by Councillor McCabe and seconded by Paul Conley. Any questions on the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting staff's recommendation to not reconsider this application? And Rosemary?
In favor.
Okay, so that's unanimous. So thank you very much for that. This will move on to council with both staff's and planning board's recommendation to not proceed with reconsideration as it does not meet the threshold. Okay, final item on the agenda, introduction of new business. Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Chris Fournier. All those in favor? Wonderful. Good night, everybody.